Okay, I think I must get going. So welcome everyone to this afternoon's parallel session. I'm Nicola Branson and I'm going to be facilitating the session. I hope you all had a great lunch and that you're feeling ready to go. So the topic that we'll be discussing in this session is the future of graduate employability and citizenry, and how can leaders help? I suppose more broadly, this relates to the thematic question number 4, which is how do we develop critical, compassionate and creative citizens of the future who will manage the complexities of the future as we see it now. So how the session is going to work is I'm going to introduce each of the discussants in the order that they're going to present. They will then present a brief not too brief input, and then we will have some engagement. And I encourage you, as in all the other sessions, to put your comments in the chat, and then we will feed those back to the relevant speakers. So let me introduce the discussants. First up, we're going to have Professor Terry, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Lusacher, and he is the Research Director for Post-School and Work at the HSRC. He has secondary academic affiliation as Associate Professor in Higher Education Studies with the University of the Free State, where he previously worked as Assistant Director, Institutional Research. Prior to that, he was a Senior Lecturer in Higher Education Studies and Extraordinary Senior Lecturer in Political Science at the University of the Western Cape. He has a PhD in Political Studies from the University of Cape Town and a postgraduate diploma in Higher Education Studies from the University of the Free State. He has studied student politics and higher education in Africa as part of a number of international research teams, and he has book publications including Student Politics in Africa, Representation and Activism. Another one is Reflections on South Africa, African Student Leaders. And then another one is Innovation at the Intersection of Global Debates and Local Experiences. So after he has spoken, we're going to have Dr. Lucy Abrams, and Dr. Abrams is Director of the Link Center at Wits University, which is a center building research on digital innovation and how digital technologies and processes influence change. Dr. Abrams convenes the master's and PhD programs in interdisciplinary digital knowledge economy studies and other short courses about technology, digital operations and leadership. She serves on the board of Tenet and on the evaluation and review reference groups for the review of the National Research Foundation. Then after Dr. Abrams speaks, we'll have Professor Francois Stradom. Professor Stradom is currently the Senior Director of Teaching and Learning at the University of the Free State, and he has been the project leader on the South African Survey of Student Engagement, the SASE survey, since 2007. Now, the SASE project, which is sponsored by the Kresge Foundation, currently works with 19 public higher education institutions across the country, and it has influenced national quality assurance practices and is a key component of the Siyaphumelela, which means We Succeed network, focusing on improving student success in higher education through the use of data analytics. So I'm now going to hand over to the discussants, and we will have their 10-minute inputs before a question and answer session.
Unmute. Thank you so much, Dr. Branson. Thank you so much, colleagues, for joining straight after lunch to this session. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see parts of my presentation this afternoon, which should just help in getting along. So let's see if this is going to work. There we go. So just as a reminder, what are we actually meant to do in this session, since I am the first one to present this afternoon in this session? How do we develop critical and compassionate and creative citizens of the future, and who will manage the complexities of the future? That is the topic, of course. That is why you are attending on the conceptualization of that question in the program. Basically relates to the notion of student-centeredness, but also that we need to, of course, embrace all the role players in higher education in order to achieve the development of critical, compassionate and creative citizens. It relates to questions of the curriculum and the co-curriculum and its relevance, and I think my colleague Professor Straden will talk to that. The experience of role players on campus. What will future generations be dealing with? What might be the implications of their educational experiences? So what are the future? What is the future of graduate employability and citizenry? How can leaders help? I have decided to go at this a little bit differently in the beginning. Originally, I thought we'll probably have to go the route of graduate attributes and so on. But I've also listened in to the presentations we've had so far and the Higher Education Leadership and Management Program. While it is critical and important, I've also heard a lot of self-congratulation, especially this morning when I was zooming in. And that's perhaps because colleagues are speaking to each other and nobody wants to really step on anybody's toes. We've had some very important conceptualizations of higher education leadership. What kind of leaders does it take to create such citizens? Visionary leaders, transformational leaders, leaders who have the bigger purpose in mind, who have bigger ideas, who are context relevant, who are global citizens, who are able to identify and resolve problems. What I want to talk, when I said I come at it a bit differently, is because we've had such courageous leadership on the campuses. We've had leadership that has been put back onto the agenda, the issue of curriculum relevance, which is something that we have been talking about since the mid-90s. It's even in the higher education YPF 97, curriculum transformation, the transformation of institutional cultures, the notion of decolonization, Africanization. We've had leaders who have courageously put back onto the agenda social justice, free higher education for the poor, insourcing of support workers. And I want to talk about the cost of leadership. I've had the privilege to be involved in a project with the University of Venda, a project that has been led by the Human Science Research Council, and that project is called Aftermath: the violence and well-being in the context of the student movement. And what student leaders actually have gone through in order to be able to make sure that future generations of poor students can study for free, that there are curriculum decolonization programs all across in so many of our institutions, that the relevance, that language policies have been reviewed, that there's insourcing happening for the poorest of the workers, and so on. I'm going to show you two themes from the exhibition that has just gone online, which is called Aftermath: Violence and Wellbeing in the Context of the Student Movement, that comes out of the work that has been done with students on the campuses of 5 universities, University of the Western Cape, University of Venda, we went to Free State, Forte, and at DUT. We would have included Tshwane University of Technology as well, but COVID-19 came into the way. Over 100 images were collected and discussed as part of the Photo Voice project that was hosted by the HSRC. This was done in the course of last year and earlier this year. 26 student leaders and activists were involved in the project. We had institution-specific face-to-face photo voice workshops. And the aim, what the student activists would like, is that this exhibition will raise awareness about the costs of leadership on a university campus, about the levels of violence that they have experienced on the university campuses and the impact that this has had on their well-being and on their future, perhaps on their ability to be compassionate, to be courageous leaders, on what it costs to be active citizens on a university campus. So these are pictures that they themselves have actually curated. They have brought them to the workshops, and as it is with Photo Voice, we would discuss them. The first picture here that I would like to show you is a picture by Asandiswa Bomva from UWC. Bomvana, my apologies. This picture was taken at UWC in 2015 during the Fees Will Fall campaign. And he explains that Songeso, his friend, is holding up the cardboard with Bongo next to him. And Asandiswa says, for me, the cardboard shows the true narrative of how it was. We were responding to violence. We were retaliating, not the other way around. So that is how student leaders see it. We tried to put something onto the agenda. We were not listened to. We shouted louder and louder and louder. We were not listened to. I must say, there are some images which may be very disturbing. So the following one, if you are sensitive, please skip that one. Because this is a picture that Sandile Masango submitted from the University of Venda. His friend, close friend Mandla Tibane here in the photo, a comrade of mine, he says, who was brutally attacked by the police. After the brutalizing treatment, he was badly injured. The police still detained him for no reason. He was about to register for a PhD, but because universities are anti-Black, his life was shortened and he died, having a pending case. I remember how we struggled to raise money. Excuse me. I remember how we struggled to raise money to pay lawyers for the charges that were fabricated against us. So that's a picture of the late Mandla Tibane from the University of Venda. That is the cost of leadership, of making sure there's free higher education, of making sure there's curriculum transformation, and so on. Out of power, but not out of responsibility, says Siphelelo Shange Mthembu from DUT, former SRC president. In this picture for him, it represents victimization, such as financial and academic exclusion that comes with being a student activist in an institution of higher learning. It also carries with it a lot of emotion because directing students and trying to assist them in a brutalizing system, when I have also been a victim of the system, was not easy. Despite my own challenges, I could not run away from my leadership responsibilities, and I had to help lead students in the right direction, says Siphelelo Mthembu from DUT. The state of Israelethu, Siyasanga Ndwai from UWC. In the picture, I'm in a police truck. I'm shouting through the window. We were arrested in parliament for protesting, along with pensioners who wanted money from the government, which they had been waiting for since the 1980s. In the truck, I was with 3 elders and my close comrade, Zwei Zazi. I've titled this image "The State of Israel," due to the fact that it depicts how we are treated in our land. The amount of violence we as young Black people and our grandparents are subjected to. The second theme, there are 6 themes. I'm only going to go through 2 themes with you, is called trauma. A violent record by Bohan Fako from the University of the Free State. Here lies the remains of what could have been a brilliant future. The impact of systemic violence is psychological and long-term. We are suffering from collective trauma as Black students in this institution. We are sharing space with the same people who violated us at Shimla Park and people who continue to violate us. We have to walk through the same corridors in which we were manhandled by the police. We are finding it very difficult to breathe. Because at any given time, we might get financially or academically excluded, expelled, or suspended, from pass with this distinction to incomplete. Madoda Ludidi submitted this picture, him in a suit with the microphone, clashing conversations is what he entitled it. This is what he thinks about this picture. After Fees Must Fall at the end of 2015, I was invited to a roundtable discussion in Johannesburg as a Friedrich Ebert Stiftung Fellow. Here I realized just how much the overall FMF narrative was divorced from the realities on the ground at Forte. I was an empty shell on that day because I recognized that nothing I could do there in that context would make a difference to what we were experiencing at Forte. Sometimes there's much more behind the picture than what one sees. And we will, if you ever do Photo Voice, you will see. Even this picture, again, Siphelelo Mthembu from DUT, he says, finding peace within. This picture was taken after my suspension. It represents me being alone. My family members would leave in the morning and I would be alone. Most of the time I was isolated and trying to avoid depression. Being at home helped, as I had the love and support of my family. And this is the last picture that I would like to show you. It's also a picture from the University of the Free State. Tsepang Mashatsi calls it, even a tight heart will never suppress or take my pain away. He captioned this picture the following way. In this picture, on face value, we note a white lady trying to console a young Black student, the leader of a Black residence that was raided by the police. The picture also suggests that she's trying to understand the frustration and the anger on his face. What is not seen is the fact that this was the acting dean of student affairs, who knew that the police were going to raid House Zwelupele, and who was aware that the instruction was given for the police to go from room to room and look for perpetrators, the forces behind the movement. The frustration, pain, and anger on his face says, you can hug me, but you will never take away the feeling of betrayal and pain inflicted on me, my people, my privacy. You knew it, so don't tell me how I should react and express my pain. Tsepang says, he was never the same after this day. He was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, showed signs of extreme anxiety, and was on antidepressants. He had to put his studies on hold and pay back his bursary. He should have graduated by now, but he's still here. All this will take more than a hug to heal. I hope I've been able to give you some impression of what it means to be a leader on campus, what it means to try and make those other leaders understand we need free education, we need a decolonized curriculum, we need a curriculum that's relevant, that gives us employment. We need to take care of our elders, our mothers and fathers who are working, cleaning our toilets, insource them. Leadership in a moment of disruption is different from what has been talked about this morning. Courageous leadership has costs, real costs. And those who are in positions, they need to be able to respond before such situations occur. These discussions were held last year and the year before. And the condition for being involved in this was that one must have either witnessed, perpetrated, or been victim to violence. The student leaders who were involved in have been basically experiencing all the three. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. And I think it's really pertinent that you're bringing right at the beginning, while we're thinking about graduate attributes, the student voice into this conversation, and reminding us about, I suppose, both the power that you have as a leader currently in the system and some of the things that were highlighted during the student protests, which still apply as we continue forward. So now I'm going to hand over to Dr. Abrahams for her presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. I'm going to talk about quite a futuristic perspective. So I think before I do that, we need a little bit of a bridge into this presentation so that the presentation is not misread as being disconnected from reality. But as humans, reality is also the future. We also imagine the future. So I just have a little story to share before I get into this. One day at WITS, in probably around the same time, 2015 or thereabouts, we had a meeting, academics, managers of departments, and on the agenda was a small matter referred to as decolonization of the curriculum. People really struggled to have that conversation, and by the end of the meeting, there had not been much of a conversation on curriculum decolonization. And as people left and moved towards the back of the room, they appeared to be more interested in the tray of sandwiches than they had been in the discussion on decolonization. So these are realities that we experience, some highly dissonant, some highly futuristic, very few of them comfortable. What I want to talk about is digital bilinguals evolving in the university. And one might think that bilinguals, we're talking about languages. In fact, when I looked online for images, all I found was images literally of languages. But the meaning of digital bilinguals is a little different. A digital bilingual is really a person who has knowledge, skills, capacities in their chosen field or interdisciplinary context, as well as in the applications, programming languages, design skills, digital pedagogies, or other complementary digital innovation knowledge. And as I say that, I would just like to make a small...
Sorry, Dr. Abrams, can we just ask you to reshare your slides, please?
Oh, you don't see the slides. I will do that.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Right. So I was just talking about digital bilinguals not meaning people who can speak different languages, but rather a digital bilingual as someone who has multiple knowledges, some of them digital. And as I say that, I'd like to make a quick disclaimer about the 4IR. I tend to think more about a sixth techno-scientific revolution, or even a seventh techno-scientific revolution, as there have been many, many knowledge and scientific revolutions, perhaps, than 4. So if we can discuss when we have the opportunity later, why would anyone be a digital bilingual? Well, there are a few examples that we can talk about. The physicist Michio Kaku, who, amongst other things, theorizes on the future of the mind and creating techno-human avatars with memories, suggests that in the future, humans will be embedded with technology, but also technology will be embedded not only with human traits, which can be modeled, but with memories. So perhaps digital bilinguals are somewhere on an evolutionary path for 21st century humans. Do we see these digital bilinguals walking around, people who are highly knowledgeable in, let's say, a particular branch of health science, and also really understand the digital applications that would suit, that would work? Do they also design the digital applications for their particular field of knowledge? Well, yes, there are digital bilinguals already walking the earth. Some of them you will find in tech hubs, spaces of emergent digital bilingualism. Some of them associated with universities, perhaps on the edges, on the periphery, on the margins of the university. In South Africa, there are over 60 such tech hubs on the African continent. There are over 600 such tech hubs, all spaces of emergent digital bilingualism. What is the relevance of this to citizenship? Well, we do understand that digital knowledge and capacities are relevant in many, many ways to building 21st century societies. And then one might ask again, what is a 21st century society? Don't we see universities that look very much like 20th century universities operating in the 21st century? And what is required? Digital bilingualism, I would suggest, is one of the transitions required to be a 21st century university in the 21st century. And what is the relevance to employability? Or rather, economic activism, economic activeness, professionalism, the ability to work or engage using technology without dependence on tech support, without calling your central network services or some tech support. One case where we see probably a high level of digital bilingualism, a high level of advancement, is with the role of vaccine scientists. Vaccine scientists who have designed the COVID-19 vaccine, who designed a digital twin or digital twins of the COVID-19 vaccine in order to model every step, every part of the process, every piece of data about the COVID-19 vaccine in order to better understand the evolutionary process, the development process, the strengths and weaknesses, and how to solve problems, which you first do in the digital twin environment, and you can then correct in the real world environment. So I thought I'd just very quickly show this extract from the ATOS blog. A digital twin is a full live replica where the scientist or the researcher or the human being collects diverse sets of rich data to understand exactly what is happening in real time. And what they did is they combined all this data to build a digital twin of the whole vaccine process, so that every part of every stage can be optimized and any changes to any process can be simulated in order to understand and test the effects. And what we now know is this is partly the reason why we've seen such a fast time to market of under a year of vaccine development. So just imagine that kind of digital bilingualism and imagine how that can apply across many, many fields of knowledge, many, many areas of research and innovation in universities, or just professionalization of the knowledge held by young people, middle-aged and elderly people, all of whom pass through the doors of the university. So I'm just showing this in visual format, and in the visual format, we can think about three elements or three perspectives to this kind of digital and future 21st century graduate who is a digital bilingual, knowledgeable in their field, maybe high energy physics, but also capable of using the relevant applications, both hardware and software, relevant to their field. We might also think about a second curriculum in the sense that, well, the second curriculum exists. It doesn't have to be built. That experience of being at a university, evolving a life beyond that life that is held by everyone, because the assumption is that by going to university, we can lead multiple lives. In this case, the second curriculum too needs to open itself to this form of digital bilingualism. And the third point, maybe then, what we begin to experience is 21st century learning, or a form of 21st century learning. So those are really the ideas I want to put out there. The remaining two slides are questions which we can come back to in discussion time. In South Africa, which languages, and by languages I mean fields of knowledge, and which related digital skills should universities consider or prioritize to communicate effectively in a particular field of knowledge or expertise, in digital or cyberspace, in the 21st century landscape? Second question, what avenues and digital tools or capacities are currently available to communicate effectively in the sciences and social sciences? And here I refer again to the emergence of tech hubs. Third question, let's revisit key assumptions about the types of digital divide currently experienced in universities. There are many, but I highlight a few. The digital divide between so-called IT professionals and academics. And when we become digital bilinguals, or rather, as we become digital bilinguals, we reduce that digital divide. The digital divide across universities, and as we become digital bilinguals, perhaps we reduce that digital divide. The digital divide between academics and students, and any other forms of the digital divide, can partly be addressed by some form of digital bilingualism. And then the second part of the interactive discussion, what constitutes 21st century universities in the 21st century world, and how does that digital bilingualism enter into that equation? We are graduates, and graduates act in so many ways. Why do we only discuss the extremes of employability and citizenship? For example, graduates can be healers, or physicists working with hadron colliders, or working in the field of brain science, or building 21st century online culture, or artists and authors, or leaders in any field in society. Lifestyles that don't neatly fit into the employability citizenship dichotomy. And then finally, do we need a more explicit focus on the second curriculum in universities aligned to 21st century realities? And that's the conversation I'm hoping we'll have a little later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abrams. I think talking about sort of the potential for digital bilingualism and how it can be introduced, or how it can open so many different doors, but also address some of the potential inequalities across our system, within our system, are very interesting. I'm now going to ask Prof. Stradom to give us his input. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you to my colleagues for the presentations. I'm not going to be putting on my video since I'll be using my slides. If you just give me a second to navigate this. Okay. You should be seeing a UFS badge. Right, I hope everything is visible. As I said, a great pleasure to be asked to share perspectives. In preparation for this session, I took a very specific lens around wanting to share the journey of the University of the Free State in helping to develop locally, so it's global and local competitive graduates while enhancing quality. My focus is on trying to share the journey to help our leaders that do a phenomenal amount of work and have multi-faceted responsibilities, from dealing with past trauma, which Terry referred to constant inequalities, while trying to grapple with and provide an education that allows students to position themselves in a very competitive world where they can better their own lives and the lives of their families. So that's the context that I would like to give for how I viewed the preparation. So our approach to graduate attributes was confronted with the one central question of how would we prove that we are developing an employable graduate? So why do we need to prove? Why do we need to provide evidence? I think the field of graduate attributes, as far as we could understand it, has moved on from statements of intent, which many South African universities and global universities have, towards an approach that is transparent and clear, not only to staff, but especially to the students. This graphic is not ideal in terms of it's trying to show a linear process. The process, as you would all know, in universities are much more organic. Lucy, I'm quite envious of the bubbles you used. I think I might borrow that graphic from you after this presentation. So I'll talk about phases, but these phases are not necessarily following on after each other, especially since we're still busy and we have had a COVID reality to deal with. So phase one is definition and consensus building. The next phase was selecting an approach and deep contextualization, and those two processes were deeply intertwined. Then phase 3, which is curriculum and co-curricular mapping, and that's where we are at the moment. It's been severely delayed by the year, but we were able to make a start towards the end. Then phase 4 is quality enhancement through reimagining pedagogy and intentional assessment integration, and then empowering our students to reflect on and display the attributes that they developed. So let me take you through the phases. So in terms of trying to define attributes in a fast changing world, we try to apply a extensive literature review and thematic analysis. Now, this was in 2019. We all know that these lists tend to change, but we did the thematic analysis to try to find attributes that are consistent throughout. So we looked at employer perspectives. That's not entirely unproblematic, but we tried to look at various contexts. We also looked at entrepreneurial frameworks, and there's several countries that you can see there. Then for us, that was very important is how do we raise quality? Because part of what students asked for is free decolonized quality education. We looked at our qualification framework, an international example, then a standards framework, which is used quite broadly internationally. But very importantly, we also then integrated previous graduate attribute statements from our faculties and also requirements from professional boards, which just shows you for any leader engaged in this how complex it is to try to settle on a share of attributes. And we did this work during 2019, and it was the consensus phase was in Senate in October. So I want to share the attributes that we identified. You will see that at the center is academic competence, because we believe these attributes need and are already being developed through the academic discipline, but that there is a need for clarity, and I'll explain the approach as we go along. So it's critical thinking, problem solving, oral and written communication, and those relate to undergraduate research skills, most eloquently articulated by the University of Adelaide. Then there's ethical reasoning, community engagement, and entrepreneurial mindset. And the foundational core skills that must underpin these attributes is literacy, numeracy, scientific literacy, ICT literacy in 2019 already way more important. And I think Lucy has put the demands much more eloquently than I can. Financial literacy, and then cultural and civic literacy. So the approach we selected is the value rubric. So what are they? They were developed by the American Association of Colleges and Universities, but they've become a global resource. So the value is the abbreviation for Valid Assessment of Learning in Undergraduate Education. We use them because they tend to avoid disciplinary jargon. They have been deeply tested with what students can do, and also at various institutions. That testing has been going on since 2010, and to date, more than 5,000 institutions across the world. This is now North and South. This has been translated into Japanese. There's conversations in China. So a resource that's in various contexts been seen as something that's useful to facilitate these conversations at institutions. So to inform, it can be used to inform curriculum design, guide development of standards, create shared expectations, and also as an evaluation tool. What do they look like? So there's a definition of the attribute. Then there's various stages of development. These are not linked to your years of study. This is how what you use to understand how these things develop. There's different components to an attribute. If you want to be a critical thinker, you need to be able to explain an issue, look for evidence around it, look at the influence of context, position yourself for an argument around that specific perspective, and so forth, and you develop them at different levels, and we would look at that. Why did we choose the value rubrics? We particularly like the assumptions that all our students bring with them a set of skills and abilities that they can use to grow from and develop. That the better higher education is at articulating its outcomes, the more likely the educators in higher education are to design and deliver intentional practices that enhance a student's ability for quality performance, and that learning is an iterative, complex process through a set of experiences, as we heard so eloquently put in earlier discussions, that learning happens not just in the classrooms, but everywhere. And then we selected these rubrics, and the sort of interrogation of them started. We started the graduate attribute skills development forum, 50 academics, professional staff. We invited student leaders to attend, and we interrogated the aspects, and we redesigned and we created our own rubrics for some of the attributes. We created new synergies, changed them, and that's how they've been positioned in the world, as a resource to be changed for context. So phase 3, where we are now, is a curriculum mapping process, which is an asset-based approach, which recognizes, and our faculties are currently engaging in, how they are developing these attributes already, and where are the areas which they would like to improve or would like to be strengthened. We also included the co-curricular space here, and specifically focusing on high-impact practices. Now, a HIP, or high-impact practice, is something that helps students to deliver and develop, to develop the critical outcomes that a higher education degree is supposed to give. So here you can see the example of service learning. If you participate in service learning, you not only learn to apply your theoretical knowledge to societal problems, you develop your values and ethics, you understand the world in a more complex way, and you learn how to be a citizen. The last slide, Chair. Phase 4 is quality enhancements through reimagined pedagogy and intentional assessment integration. I think you cannot develop attributes if you don't think very carefully about your pedagogy now. And that we need to enable, our pedagogical models need to enable application, integration, awareness of self and others. And we've got a wonderful construct, the notion of Ubuntu certainly comes in there, caring, the ethics of care, and that our pedagogical models need to integrate those. It is about aligning your assessment so that you actually assess these attributes, and that you can know as an institution that you're developing it. And in phase 5, and please, these are not, as I indicated, following chronologically, we're already developing platforms to create electronic portfolios at scale. Why? We have the value rubrics for the institution to reflect on graduate attributes, but the e-portfolio is the tool the student can use to reflect on their learning and own it. There's empirical proof that if you create these reflection processes, students understand how they learn, why they should learn, and it advances their progress. And what we're then integrating with the e-portfolio project is helping students how to display their attributes on digital platforms like LinkedIn today. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Prof. Great, so those are the initial presentations, and I'm now going to officially open the floor for questions and a question session, but also a reflection section. I don't see any current questions in the chat. So maybe what I'll do is start by providing some thoughts on the sort of linkages between the different presentations. And I think for me, something that Prof. Osman said this morning, when we're thinking about sort of what is it that we want as key attributes for graduates today, she said she sort of encouraged us to think beyond just what is needed in the labour market, but what it means to be human. I think she called it vibrant, compassionate citizens, and who are really equipped to embrace adversity and be agents of change. I think Terry's presentation earlier highlighted that being a sort of vibrant, compassionate citizen, or being part of that change, does often come with a cost to someone, and that leadership is clearly quite important in how a student who will be a graduate engages and ends up, you know, transitioning into post-school life. So I think that's something to think about. And I suppose the question then becomes, what is the role of universities for nurturing these attributes beyond just the skills to be able to do the job, but further? I suppose I would also extend what Prof. Osman was saying to ask whether these human attributes that we're talking about have become even more essential actually in the labour market in this time of uncertainty. And so shifting, I think, to thinking a little bit more about the employers, my question, again, with that framework that Prof. Straden put together, is we almost have these two different entities that are both in uncertain and uncharted territories. Both have the student, the graduate entering out and needing to have certain attributes to deal with these uncertainties, but also the labour market. So I ask, how then do we introduce that sort of, you spoke about it being a cyclical process. How do we introduce a sort of feedback link from the employer, from the labour market back in to, and then finally, just in terms of this sort of digital bilingualism, which feels like it has so much potential, especially in times like these. I suppose in terms of how can it be utilized to create some of the experiences that are required, that aren't necessarily currently available in the labour market. So in terms of during the actual students' time at university, getting experience that then can help them in the labour market. And I had a thought about this, also the digital bilingualism, about whether at the same time, does it result in students being able to differentiate themselves more, or does it become something which is then going to be a sort of minimum requirement? So I'm going to stop talking there and ask the presenters to see if they have any further thoughts, and to also reflect on the other two presenters that spoke. So Terry, could you start, please?
Thank you so much, Nicola. Well, first I want to appreciate the presentations by Dr. Lucien Abrahams, as well as by Professor Francois Straden, which as it says in the chat, it's very interesting because we are indeed going at kind of the similar, a similar topic in a very different ways. And I think that is what hopefully is going to generate some broader debate eventually. I must say, if I may just reflect briefly on Lucy's presentation. I also thought immediately, of course, when the notion of digital bilinguals came up, I thought of multilingualism, bilingualism. You know, we're talking those kind of languages, but what we're actually talking about is language in a bigger sense or in a different sense, about being able to navigate the digital space. And language being a carrier of culture, carrier of understanding, of meaning, and so on, has a much broader meaning than just being able to speak is Xhosa or English or French or something like that. But it actually, and it gave me the sense almost that maybe one needs to assimilate almost into the digital space to be really able to navigate it in the way that Lucy talks about it. And perhaps the encouraging thing about that is that while I consider myself a digital immigrant, having been born in the 70s, by the time I left high school, there wasn't even yet an internet. So my children are very much so-called digital natives, who at times explained to me how this particular app is now supposed to work and so on, being in grade 2. You know, and that in a way, of course, shows perhaps precisely in a kind of rudimentary, simplified way what that might mean, you know, down the line in 15, 10, 20 years. And that to me then actually, the way I understand it connecting with Professor Strayed and Francois' wonderful presentation is that is an essential aspect of the graduate, right? That is one thing where unless we are able to navigate as graduates, as lecturers, as teachers, as citizens, as engineers or cleaners or gardeners, unless we are able to navigate the digital space, we will lose out on a huge aspect of reality. But so we also do need all kinds of other, as we may want to call it, graduate attributes, right? All kinds of other skills, attitudes, and knowledges that are not necessarily fostered in my public law 101 course or in my course in mechanical engineering, but that need to be part of the whole rounded, the holistic nature of a higher education experience. And if I may, so what I have been trying to present is that there are all kinds of higher education experiences, and they are actually attributes that we do not think about, that are being fostered. And some of them are very positive, of course. The fact that students come to campus and they take an active interest in what they are learning, and they are critical about the student experience, and where they see challenges and where they see problems, they want to engage with it. That, of course, is precisely the critical thinking that we want to see, right? But then how these matters are being raised, and sometimes how these matters are being responded to, the way they are being raised and so on, may not be what we would like, and the kind of attributes that we would like to foster, and that can come with a huge cost. But let me leave it there for now. Thank you.
Am I next?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
I don't sort of want to look for commonality across the presentations sort of in a forced kind of way, but I think so I was searching for something that is actually common, and I think what's common is the issue of communication. Some presenters mentioned navigation. I think that's common. Another thing I think is communication, because digital is not just a technology. Digital is a language. That's why we refer to coding as coding languages, because they do exactly what Prof. Lucia just said. They carry culture. Software carries culture. So does hardware. It's maybe slightly less visible. So yeah, that's my contribution, is that I think the opportunity to be digital means that future graduates can be even more empowered in their ability to communicate. I think that younger graduates entering the workforce will be more digital, will be more bilingual, will differentiate and distinguish themselves. I hope that this won't just be yet another form, you know, the 4th level digital divide or the 5th level digital divide, just yet another level of digital divide, but rather that across the university community, this transition occurs, so that if there is any differential, if there is any digital divide, it is only an age divide, because we can't do anything about that. Well, we can do very little about that. You know, previous generations are not going to come back and become digital bilinguals, but new generations will evolve, and that's okay. That's an okay divide. The rest, not. Thank you.
Let me take a stab on how I'm trying to make sense of the rich perspectives and the very good questions that Patrick is asking. And I also see Moeketsi, but I just want to take a moment to read that properly also. So for me, I think the 3 views is about creating graduates in a very specific social context. Now, Terry helped us focus on a very specific violent moment in higher education, but I don't think any of us would deny that we're still dealing with the consequences of that violent moment for staff and students. I want to, and I think, how do you develop or create a teaching, or I don't almost, maybe holistic is the best word, but an environment that allows people to heal, but to grow. And I want to make a link to both colleagues with an example. We were asked by DET to do a survey on students' access and use of learning materials in this year. We got over 49,000 respondents on the survey, and the report is being finalized for release now. But I want to highlight one thing that came out in terms of learning with technology. Linking to Terry's contextualization, one quote from a student was, "It was very difficult to learn online. Our parents would ask us to fetch water during a test, and they would want to use our NSFAS funding to buy essentials in the house." And this is now a quote actually from a Kwakwa student, and many of you will know Kwakwa has huge service delivery challenges and was deeply disrupted. So the Kwakwa students are in a, I don't want to be the, in a incredibly pressurized space, but we need to help them to develop the attributes to cope with the world Lucy is helping us think about. Now I want to have a different perspective from Terry on his kids. I don't know his kids. I think they're much bigger now than when he was at the university. But I think we bought a little bit too much into the northern narrative of digital natives. What we saw during COVID, and certainly what the data is telling us and what students told us, is that they can maybe be brilliant at WhatsApp, but they can't set up a hotspot on their phone. They can't use Word. They can't use PowerPoint. And that comes back to the contextual point where our students come from. The majority of our students do not come from a well-resourced environment. And how do we help them become bilinguals? As Lucy has certainly pushed my thinking to think about it. I think how do we use, she talks about the second curriculum, which often refers to cultural aspects, which for me links deeply to pedagogy. But how do we create an environment that allows students, regardless of the background they come from, to become part of a future which we're trying to imagine? I want to come back a little bit to Nicola's question around the feedback loop with employers. And I think the reason why I envy Lucy's graphic, because it looks a bit more organic, is I don't think the attributes stay static. We tried in our thematic analysis to find things that were common across several decades, but at the same time we had to look at our context. We can't talk about making you a global citizen and prioritize that above your ability, as Lucy indicated, to communicate in a written or oral, verbal way. You must be able to express yourself. Or we had to make tough choices. We would have loved to have 21 graduates attributes, but that's not realistic. 80 is already pushing it a lot farther. So that would be some of the links I'm trying to make. I think we've got deep contextual challenges which we need to handle, and our leaders deal with that every day on campus, whether it's late NSFAS payments. But then we've got this phenomenal potential in our students, and I'll give you another quote from the research we did this year. We found students found learning with technology incredibly challenging. We did a thematic analysis using an algorithm. We got about 16 challenges that were common across the 49,000 students, but we found 12 benefits of learning with technology. And one of them was beautifully captured by a student on how I learned that I could see I could do this. In the beginning, I couldn't talk to Word or to PowerPoint like I needed to, but the crisis of the pandemic forced me to, and I could see I could do it. I could access YouTube when my lecturer's notes were not enough. I could go to TED and get that content to get a better understanding, and that empowered me as an individual. So we were wonderfully surprised of how the almost forced engagement with the digital space helped people to find strengths that they didn't know they have. And I'll stop there. I hope that's not too confusing.
Thank you. And I think Dr. Abrahams would like to reflect on some of the points you've made.
Thanks, Nicola. Just fiddling with many buttons. Can everyone see this particular screen with the tessellation on the right-hand side?
Yes, we can see it. Thanks.
All right. So maybe this is just a very, very, very tiny step, micro step towards being a digital bilingual. We're doing a course with teachers, 17 teachers in the Saldanha Bay circuit on the West Coast Education District. They teach grade 8 and grade 9 mathematics. They are between the ages of 23 and 52. And one of the subjects, or rather topic areas in mathematics is called tessellations. This is a tessellation that you see here. So it's a sort of just a successive geometric forms overlaid on each other many, many, many times. Now, if you were teaching tessellations without digital tools, without dynamic software, there are many of them, GeoGebra, Geometer, Sketchpad. And the DBE has recommended GeoGebra because it's a free software. But if you were trying to teach grade 8 and 9 mathematics learners anywhere, and also in Saldanha Bay, the schools of Saldanha Bay, tessellations, without the teacher being able to use dynamic software, it would be almost impossible. So I just thought that was, something very specific. And again, we can multiply this over and over and over again, that this is contextual to secondary mathematics teachers teaching grade 8 and grade 9 math syllabus. So how do we think about this? Not so much as university managers, but as university academics, how do we get to being university academics and managers and leaders who are constantly exploring, looking for, and finding ideas about these forms of digital capacities, whether you accept the term or the idea of becoming a digital bilingual or not. How do we actively explore this field of knowledge, this complementary field of knowledge? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I just want to pick up on a question that's been posed in the chat, which is, it's coming from Walter Klaassen. He's asking, do we not totally overestimate the more than basic digital skills and the information seeking and evaluation skills of learners, especially the issues around how to find appropriate sources and how to evaluate these sources of information? I think it's probably best posed to you, Dr. Abrams, but anyone, please jump in there.
Shall I?
Yes, please.
Afternoon, Prof. Klaassen, good to see you again. I'm not sure if you mean overestimate or underestimate, but I would say that it's very interesting. It's a very interesting phenomenon that both learners and teachers and academics do tend to have more than basic skills. Especially when it comes to social media, people do the most astonishing things on social media. The maths teachers in Saldanha Bay, for example, told us about maths teacher communities on Facebook that they knew about and that they were part of, that they become part of, that they were participating in. And learners do all kinds of things online, and we say post pictures as if that's just something that everybody can do. but people do all kinds of quite artistic work and creative work in the social media space. So I'm not sure that we do overestimate. The question is, why is that capability, that ease of use, that facility in the social media environment apparently not carried through into other environments which are also social? Education is such a social environment. I want to suggest that it's us and it's our perceptions, and that actually if there was greater encouragement or more attractive social media in the educational media, if educational media was as attractive or more attractive than social media, than Facebook, than Twitter, than Instagram, and so on, learners would be there. They would be doing what we want them to do. I think the challenge is to us. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Nicola, may I?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. Thanks. Actually, I want to link the point made by Walter Claassen with the one just above by Moeketsi Musia, which is very intriguing, actually. It's a very important point, especially in the current context. The question whether we are not actually expecting the students to have, now, for example, the digital skills already that we actually, think that they should have upon leaving the university, that they need to have them as well upon joining the university to be able to participate in the university. That is a very important point. I just wanted to raise two things in relation to that. So Francois, of course, knows, and Nicola, you've introduced me before I joined the Human Science Research Council at the University of the Free State. I was working in institutional research, and Francois, what he has presented actually, what he has also referred to with SASI, shows you how important it is to know your student and to know your students from the start, from when they are entering all the way to the point when they graduate, or even after they have graduated with tracer studies and so on. So it just creates this thing that has also in the 20-year review of the Council on Higher Education been emphasized so much, that we need knowledge. This is the age of knowledge. We are living in knowledge societies now. At least the context within, especially the higher education system, finds itself. And there's such a huge amount of diversity in the system and with the students that are coming in and in the system. We need to know them, and how can we know them? So one way, of course, is institutional research. One is to survey the students all the time, regularly, to understand what the challenges is and where they are at in their learning. The other thing, of course, is to engage with those who are meant to represent the student voice, and who are students themselves, and who are meant to join those structures where different kinds of expertises are meant to play out in steering the institution. And here, of course, I'm referring to student leadership and student representation at all levels, which is another thing that we have been pushing. But so the big question, though, and that is the one that Moeketsi Musia is raising, is what do we do when we are encountering students who seek to join the institution, but who do not have the skills to actually engage with the basics. So if in the past that would have been the transport money to come to campus, in the current context, it is to have digital connectivity, to have your devices, to have your data and so on, and your ability to actually navigate a digital learning environment. I think I'm going to hand here to Franco. He's going to take this further.
Thank you. I think I do not profess to be an expert anywhere close to Lucy in terms of understanding digital skills. What I can go on is what students have told us, and to an extent, you know, we looked through about 3,600 pages of qualitative data. And we also asked a question of students during the emergency remote learning, what skills they wish they had. And that data suggests that if it's Prof. Klaassen is correct, students asked, they said, I can't type, so I can't finish my assessments as fast as I want to. So I guess it's all about how you define what is a basic skill. If you information seeking, one of the skills students said they needed, they want to be able to do searches more effectively, how to use the library more effectively. So at least from their perspective, they feel that they do not have the skills at the level they would like to have them. Whether that means that they're underskilled, I guess, if you take a subjective view of it. But certainly we can see, and we've had a lot of complaints, and I've talked to various colleagues across the system about colleagues complaining that students don't write clearly in their emails. They struggle to understand instructions. So I think that is the context which we have. I certainly don't think it's a unique context. As far as I can understand, most systems, whether they're highly developed or developing country contexts, have had some of these challenges of connectivity. I read an article at the beginning of lockdown where Harvard was bemoaning the connectivity of their students in and around Boston. So I think one shouldn't go into a mode that our context is so unique, because I simply don't think that's true. I do also, on the other hand, think that there's phenomenal things we can do and are doing already. One thing we've seen from engaging with colleagues is, and there were several comments already made at this conference about how universities have been responsive and have created support. Lecturers took to giving out their personal cell phone numbers to help students via WhatsApp if students couldn't use the learning management system. That happened at massive scale, as far as we could see. And Lucy is correct. I don't think, I definitely can't compete with any millennial skill on social platforms, because I'm fundamentally stunted in that realm. But I think the fact that became a second platform to continue the year and save the academic year is something one needs to take into consideration. So I agree, there's skills work, there's phenomenal work done across the world, and that we can just integrate and adapt for our context to upskill our students, if that's the right word to use. Build on their strengths, and then very importantly, I think what we've learned is the point that Lucy made around design. You have to think very carefully about what learning environments you design, and how you use the environments that you have. And then further than that, if you want to create integrative experiences that create a different graduate, how do you adapt your current platforms to enable students to learn these skills, so that people are not disadvantaged by the fact that we're in a remote circumstance.
Okay, so are there any further comments towards those reflections? I wonder, we've still got some time, so quite a few questions at the end of your presentation. Are there any particular ones that you would like to revisit with the panelists?
Yeah, yes, let me have a look at those. And I'll just make another quick comment on this last round of the conversation. And I think it's fair to say that not everyone is either digitally literate or digitally illiterate. We have digital literacy. You could say that then evolves as we increase our capacities in digital literacy. We become digitally fluent. So that would be digital fluency. And then when we add this capacity that I've suggested, you know, the bilingual capacity, the capacity to code and program and produce our own apps and so on, maybe that's digital mastery. So everyone, any student, any academic is going to be at some different level of digital literacy or digital fluency or digital mastery. But isn't that true for any language? I've just been marking assignments from students at the Wits Business School. I can promise you that their level of English language literacy is not the same. The majority are digitally literate. A few are digitally fluent, and very few, sorry, let me say that again. All or the majority, the vast majority, are literate in English. Many are fluent in English, but not all. And very few have mastered English. They are in the age group probably in their 30s and 40s. So I think we can expect difficulties in literacy, levels of literacy, fluency, and mastery, irrespective of the language, if digital were to be regarded as a language. And that should not necessarily put us in a position where we argue that, well, because of relatively lower levels of digital literacy than might be ideal, we don't continue on this road, or the road is too difficult, or any of those kinds of ways of having this conversation. We accept the English literacy of students when they write exams, or whatever language, the German literacy if they're writing German, or the Xhosa level of literacy if that's the subject they're writing. We accept the level of literacy and we try to further it. And I'm suggesting we should do the same here. The actual access problem is a different problem, but you know, let's not. We understand that problem, and it's one which is not too easily solved, but we need to pay much more attention to it, because if we don't, we're just culpable in everybody falling behind. So, you know, any of these, I think we have about half an hour left. Let me invite the participants by indicating in the chat which of these questions they might like to engage with. I think we've spoken quite a lot about this first set of questions. you know, in various ways.
It's 15 hours.
Perhaps people want to talk a little bit more about tech hubs. Perhaps people want to talk a bit more about, you know, the state of the digital divide across universities. What would be another possible?
Dr. Abrams?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, based on what you were just talking about in terms of sort of the access issues, so access to technology or access to becoming part of the platforms that allow you to become a digital bilingualist versus actually, you know, becoming or mastering bilingualism. It seems to tie in quite nicely with your third question, which is let's revisit key assumptions about the types of digital divide. I think you've added an additional point to those provided here, or maybe it's the underlying characteristic. And I think Prof. Stradham also picked up on this, that you know, the universities, well, when we're not offline or online, you know, the university campuses provide a space where students have some of the equality from their home backgrounds gets equalized. And so at this time when students are back home, can we, I suppose, differentiate between those questions of access versus sort of the levels of mastery once you can actually engage with digital technology? Maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah. Let me, you know, start by inviting my colleagues on the panel to maybe comment first, and then I can come back with a view.
Okay, great. Who would like to start?
I can give it a stab. I think what I can add to at least if we're talking about the digital divide is in a crisis situation like we've just been through, that divide starts having many dimensions to it. If I have to give you numbers in terms of our analysis, I think it was something like 40,000 mentions of a network, device and data by the students that responded. So by far, in terms of addressing the digital divide, the issue of infrastructure and having access to devices and then the enabling data, that's a perspective I could give you that. When one talks about the digital divide, it invariably comes back to the skills that students then also have. Does my level, and I love the nuance that Lucy provided around, should I be fluent but I'm literate, and I want to be fluent because the environment for learning and teaching that we've created requires fluency. And I don't perceive myself as fluent. You can't separate in the digital divide discussion, as far as I can see out of this very specific experience in 2020, the issue of having the skills and having access to the infrastructure to be able to engage.
Thank you so much. I think that is a good challenge that Lucy threw out. I want to share something that I have shared in a previous dialogue between USAf and the HSRC at the end of June, and that comes actually out of a massive international survey that I was involved in with colleagues from the US, Germany, and the United Arab Emirates, a global student affairs survey. And I think Francois will probably agree with me with what I'm just going to show here now. Can I share the screen?
Yeah, I've stopped sharing.
Thank you so much. Okay, so oh, that's the wrong screen. I'm just gonna show you this. So coming up with looking at which students were the most affected across the globe, and here specifically focusing on the South African data, we found that COVID-19 and emergency remote learning impacted students on 3 domains. So there were variations in 3 domains. The one is the personal ICT access domain, which is basically having access to data, having a device. The socio-cultural community kind of household level, which we've also heard Francois talk about, having to fetch water while being in an exam or so. Is the social space at home, is the home learning at home environment conducive to learning? And then the network infrastructure, having electricity, having water, having a mobile network access that is, where you can even have Zoom or anything. So we conceptualize that on a global scale in this kind of 3 domains. But there was another point that I wanted to make briefly, and that is to actually come back to the original question, and that is the future of graduate employability and citizenry. How can leaders help? How can leaders help? And in this respect, I just want to do a little quick advertising insert. In 2016, the Council on Higher Education produced this book here, Reflections of South African University Leaders. And it spans a very long time, 1981 to 2014, with portraits of DVCs and vice chancellors in it, showing what are the characteristics of good university leadership and responsive leadership. And this year in May, the council published a second iteration of this, where I was happy to be involved in with Denise Webstock and Ntokozo Bengu, which is this, the reflections of South African student leaders from 1994 to 2017, where they are a fascinating group of student leader portraits in there, including some people that are very well known now, appearing in front of commissions in Johannesburg on a daily basis. Advocate I forgot his name. Musisi Kakane, of course. Advocate Musisi Kakane, former Wits SRC, Prishani Naidu, also former Wits SRC, as well as a fascinating number of student leaders from across the board. And what that shows is the importance of responsiveness in both cases, of listening, of communication, of listening, what Lucy was talking about, communicating, and of course also now through different kinds of media. Listening to what the students are saying, listening also what staff are saying, and so on, their challenges, and then responding to that very timely. Yeah, thank you.
So it strikes me that universities invest, and sometimes the funds are funds that universities themselves, sometimes these are DHET infrastructure grants. Billions of rands in physical infrastructure, bricks and mortar. And how is that useful to us today? Wits is a ghost town, has been for 9 months of this year, not going to change next year. I can't unfortunately speak about other campuses. I haven't been on them, but perhaps it is similar elsewhere. Schools. Schools are ghosts. One of the teachers sent us on our WhatsApp group a photograph of learners in a classroom. And he said very often there are 25% of learners in that classroom. These are the same university students and learners who we're talking about today, who don't have data, who don't have a device. And we've understood this for at least 20 years. This transition from bricks and mortar. How many of us on this seminar today, in this workshop today, go to a bank? Or do we do internet banking? Banks shut down. We know all about that. The bank branches closed, they were put to other use and so on. When are universities going to wake up and smell the digital? Smell the code, the bits and bytes? That instead of complaining that we can't go digital because our students don't have access, let's put the infrastructure money. Please, I'm begging you, can we put the infrastructure money into giving the students devices and data? Because that's what they need from us. The idea that, you know, there's massive return on investment to the student from further investment in infrastructure or even maintaining existing infrastructure, I can't see it. It may be that there's a case to be made for that, but if there's a case to be made, then we must make it on paper, in writing, as we are required to do whenever we spend money. And if we can't make the case, then I think it's time to recognize that we have to pay for our students going digital in the villages where they are at home fetching water. I'll stop there for now. Sorry, anyone who knows me here, I'm an old activist, so that explains it.
Good.
Thank you. I think that raises a very provocative point of like, where should the universities be investing? I suppose to bring it back full circle then is to ask what can't be, what are the attributes that graduates require that can't be fostered through the digital environment. So if you're talking about investment going into providing that, you know, the infrastructure to be able to, for students to access digital technology from where they are, what are we then missing? Maybe some thoughts on that. I suppose it's the social component that Prof. Osman was talking about earlier.
Just a quick and maybe a naughty comment is many years ago, I think it was around 1996 or maybe it was before, a very famous author on the subject of universities spoke about the university in ruins. I don't know if anyone recalls that. And of course, there was a rush to defend the university because now this particular author was, you know, trying to tell us the university is no more. And everybody was saying, no, 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 the university is still there. But maybe this is what he was talking about, the university of bits and bytes, as opposed to, you know, the university of bricks and mortar. So that's just a naughty comment, sorry.
Yeah, I think to further on the point, so I know at the University of Cape Town, when the lectures started to be recorded, and this is prior to this year, there was a drop in attendance and the concern around that, and then what then was missing from the sort of holistic education that was coming through. So yeah, your thoughts on that?
If I can maybe make a comment there, I think this relates to the point around I think I want to link to Prof. Osman's comments, Wim de Villiers' example of Quentin Quarantino. I think our pedagogical models will need to change fundamentally. We are at a stage where we need to think very differently about how teaching and learning takes place, but also about the opportunities that have been created by the disruption of COVID. Universities are now, I think, fundamentally understanding in a different way how do we create environments where students can learn at different times, in different spaces, in different ways. And what kind of platforms do we need to invest in, whether that's through shared services models, and very eloquently put by Lucy, what kind of tough questions we need to ask of how investment is managed. I see in the infrastructure and efficiency grant sixth cycle that's come out, there's already a much greater emphasis on digital infrastructure. So I think there is already moves, but I think that could go further depending on until where we're willing to push the boundaries. I do think the comment made around by Sybil around basic infrastructure such as electricity not being in place, and that's something definitely on our Kotwa campus, which was a very big challenge this year. That requires a different level of intervention and engagement.
Terry, do you have any thoughts? No. And then Dr. Abrams, I see you're commenting in the chat. Do you want to elaborate on your points?
Well, I was just feeding back on Sybil's comment. You're right. The moment you have a question and you think you have an answer to that question, there's another question. And I think I'm happy that that's happening in a conference, because very often in a conference, what happens is we say stuff and it ends there. And we realize that, you know, what we're talking about here can't end in the conference. What Sybil's comment raises is, where might the electricity and other infrastructure, other university infrastructure, be best located for the 21st century university? At the university, in Joburg or East London, or, you know, 30 kilometers from Polokwane, or where the students live. And perhaps to some extent, that's the beauty of virtual infrastructure. And one can just as well buy electricity, assuming, of course, that electricity is catered for in the, sorry, let me just switch that off. That electricity is physically available, then one can buy electricity with a voucher. So university sort of planners and designers and the finance people and so on, you know, really need to get to thinking about these issues. Thinking about, I mean, we know the size, we don't have to tell each other, we know the size of the infrastructure investment grant proposals that go from universities to the DHET. If we rethought those kinds of proposals, might we get somewhere? I don't know, because we've never done it. But is it not time to begin taking steps in that direction. I'm not suggesting that this is a one-step process. It might be a 10 or a 12 or a 15-step process. But it does appear that pandemic or no pandemic, this is a belated conversation. Even if or when thousands, how many thousands of students do we have? I'm not sure if it's 500,000 yet. 500,000 students go back to universities. Does that mean they don't need data and devices? So the strategic thinking, the planning functions, all perhaps need to get into a much deeper process of thinking about the notion of infrastructure. And I agree, Sybil, digital infrastructure must then include, at the very least, any other infrastructure that is needed to make digital usable. But unless we apply the brain power, the time that we have applied to planning for universities and infrastructure and budgets, unless we apply that same time, that same resource, that same salary of the CFO and the finance team and the, all the administrators that we pay in universities to be a non-digital university, unless we apply some of that resource, we won't know what the answers are. I'll stop there.
May I take it from there, Chair?
Yes, please. We are moving towards closing, so maybe include sort of your last comments as part of your discussion now. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. No, I just wanted to tie that back to our topic, because I think it's a huge question, and I think it's a very, very timely question. We, centralized, decentralized model. It shows us actually the COVID-19 lockdown experience and emergency remote learning across the globe has showed us actually that something that sometimes we might not be, so aware of, or that's not at the top of our minds, and that is the ability of campus to level the playing field. That the campus actually provides in terms of so many things, whether it's the basics of water and electricity, housing, connectivity, a social environment that is conducive to learning, and so on, provides in so many ways a more level playing field between students and student groups that come from very different circumstances. But it's not only about infrastructure. It's not enough to roll out electricity and connectivity and give everybody a device and now you can learn from home. What about blind students? What about students who have got other kinds of learning styles or disabilities? What about students who would not be able to study from home because they at home they have got care responsibilities that they would not be able to get out of, and so on and so on. And here, so it actually requires us to think through across what I've showed, across all the three domains: the household and community domain, the personal domain, which also includes the psychological, mental, and so on, not only the physical or the device, as well as then the infrastructure, the network industries, as sometimes called, across all the three domains. It requires us to think through, is it possible to level the playing field at home for every single student to be able to have more or less across all these domains the same kind of conditions? Can the student ecology be impacted in an equalizing manner in a decentralized provision as it can on campus. And I mean, perhaps one needs to speak to UNISA a bit and look at what is UNISA doing in comparison to what a residential university is and can do. And then, of course, to tie it back to our question of today, how are we going to try and impact on the, for example, diversity skills of students when they never ever exit their local community? How are we going to impact on their leadership? So it will require a very different way of operating. And since I'm working a lot with student affairs professionals, I know they are grappling with this, and they have tried to also put the co-curriculum in some way online. But this is a massive task. And I think this is something that is going to occupy us. Hopefully this is not going to be just a short-term discussion and then lockdown is over and we say, okay, fine. The new normal means that we go back to business as usual, but that we actually start thinking like Lucy has started to think about, well, is the university really the pillar building of brick and mortar, or what is it actually what the university of the future will look like? And how can we make sure that it is an accessible institution? It has, it has built into it the kinds of principles of social justice, quality education, and so on that we want to see across the board. Thanks. And I think with that, I also want to thank the other panelists, and I want to thank the chairperson and our participants for this session. It's been really invigorating. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And then Prof. Stratham, would you like to have a closing comment? I know we're very short on time and there's some great comments coming up in the chat, but maybe this conversation can continue in the engagement rooms afterwards. Prof. Stratham.
From my side, thank you for the opportunity to participate. I think this is a very enriching conversation, and points to the complexities today's higher education leaders need to engage with if they do want to deliver a graduate for a future which we don't know what it will look like yet.
Thank you. And final comments from you, Dr. Abrahams?
Thank you very much to the chair, the facilitating chair of this session, to the fellow panelists, to I think you called attendees here on Zoom, with all the comments in the chat. We're sorry to hear you, but as we say, it's a new universe, a virtual universe. Thank you very much to everyone.
Okay, and then I just want to close the session and say thank you so much to our panelists. When you first spoke, I was thinking, how are these all going to connect, these points going to connect, but you wove them all together into a fascinating discussion, which I felt privileged to be part of. And then I encourage you all to head back to Event Mobi to look at the visualization that has come out of today. I think that's another sort of digital bilingualism type of way of looking at some of the things from today. But yeah, enjoy the rest of the summit. All the best.